What's up, everybody? Before we get into this episode, we have to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. Hawkeye Dynamic is the best option if you're trying to get any force plate data or if you're trying to collect any isometric mid-thigh pulls. Not only can you do isometric mid-thigh pulls for the lower body, but I call it an isometric mid-thigh pull for your upper body, where you're able to do an isometric push-up into something where your back is pushing into a bar and your hands are on the force plate. I utilized Hawkins force plates and Hawkins software when I was at Towson. Still utilize it now when I'm at Goldfinch. If you're using the other competitors, I don't know what you're doing. Hawkins customer service is second to none. Hawkins software and their hardware, again, second to none. Check them out in the link down below. Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company SleepMe. SleepMe makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad, so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Oura Ring and with the SleepMe tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below. If you're looking to train your athletes in person or remote, you need to make sure that you're utilizing TeamBuildr. I have had TeamBuildr since 2019 and still utilize it with my remote athletes. This makes everything simple, from the ability to program, have videos right there, wellness questionnaires. Loved being able to have it in person at the rack at Towson, and being able to have it in person now at Goldfinch. This has made my life easier as a coach. If you're still printing on paper, I don't know what you're doing. If you have a different software company, again, I don't know what you're doing. Check out TeamBuildr down in the link below. Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors, and the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And we have a legend in the field who is actually doing the same exact thing that I'm doing now. We have Coach Ron McKeefery on the show. Coach, thank you for joining us today. I greatly appreciate you taking time to talk with all of us.
Justin, man, it's awesome to be here. Appreciate all that you're doing for the community as well. And just, I know how much goes into putting the shows like this on, and really, really impressed and appreciative of what you're doing right now.
Thanks for the kind words. One of the things that I want to talk about, so anybody, first of all, if you haven't read CEO Strength Coach, I got it this week, and I read through it in an entire week. I got obsessive. So if strength coaches, if you're like that, you're on spring break, read the book. It's a fantastic book. And one of the things that I want to first start with is how ahead of the time you were with what you're talking about entrepreneur-wise and what you did with Iron Game Chalk Talk. Like, I guess my question is, how were you so ahead of the curve? Like, that was unbelievable to me as I was reading this book.
Yeah, I think I've always been entrepreneurial minded, even as a strength coach. I think, I always try to think outside the box, try to always go against the current. I think that was just because I was such a young head strength coach that I was forced to kind of really pick the brains of people that have walked the path that I'm walking, and listening to a lot of their problems, a lot of their pain points. I wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible. And so I think looking outside the box, trying to find solutions, that kind of started that path. And then, I went through a coaching change at South Florida, my ninth year at South Florida, where the head coach got let go. And, here I am, having helped build a program, put blood, sweat, and tears into a program, feeling like a program would have my back, in moments like that. And, and my job was all of a sudden in jeopardy. And, we had adopted our 3 kids and, and here I am, the breadwinner of our family, and my job's in jeopardy. And that just didn't sit well with me. And came across a book called The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Did it very much just like you just did with that book, where I read it in a day. I was just obsessed about it. And the idea of creating content and, affiliate marketing and things along those lines was just so, I never even thought about that as a strength coach. And, then that just set me down kind of an entrepreneurial journey. And that led to, podcasting and little mini courses and writing a book and a couple books and those types of things. So, yeah, I think I've been fortunate that, circumstance has kind of driven that. But for the most part, it's just trying to keep my eyes open to what's out there beyond just the 4 walls of a weight room.
That's something that you do talk a lot about in the book, about like, hey, look outside of the weight room, look outside of how people are going to interact with you. But then you always tie it back to the fact that when you do that, you will then do a better job in the weight room for your staff, for your athletes. And that's one of the biggest points that I want everybody to understand with this book is it will then help you be a better coach when you understand what everybody else is doing, much like a player. If he understands what the play is designed to do, can block better, run the route better, throw the ball better, right?
Yeah, what I tell people now is that we're still really in the first 100 years of our profession, and so we're making a lot of the mistakes that medicine and law and business and marketing and all these other disciplines have made, many times over, and so learning from other disciplines and then being able to apply it to our profession, I think gives you a leg up.
I love what you wrote here too about in the weight room, it needs to not be a dog and pony show, because I feel like that has maybe gone the opposite direction since you last wrote this. This book is now, we're in 2014, so 9 years old. I feel like the dog and pony show has kind of gotten a little bit more and more into what can start to happen in the weight room nowadays.
I think, I think there's definitely a camp of coaches out there that have never been, either in, major college football or major elite sport or those types of things, that look and a lot of things just don't make sense. The jumping up and down, the screaming at an athlete, whatever the thing is. And I think the people that are in it, you understand that you're willing to do almost anything to help your athletes have success, and if that takes you getting in their face and help them go to another level, sometimes you do that. Sometimes it means you acting like an idiot, and jumping up and down and doing whatever, right? And you're not really thinking about the outward perception of that, or you're thinking about the things along those lines. Nobody wants to be a get back coach. Nobody wants to do those types of things, right? But when you're in the moment, if there's a job to do, like most strength coaches, you'll just do the job, whatever the job is to help you win a football game, you'll do. And so I think in this profession, it's really easy to point a finger and take it out of the context of a situation and point to how our profession's messed up. And what I try to do is I try to look for the good in everybody. And so people that, people would point to, make fun of, do whatever, I would reach out to them and try to understand the context of what they were doing and why they were doing what they were doing, and not just, assume, what it was. And, and 9 times out of 10, what I found was those were pretty good people that were very similar, to me, that I could learn something good. I would always tell my staff, I'm going to take the good and leave the bad. I take the good and leave the bad in philosophies. I take the good and I leave the bad in character traits. It's kind of, I know you're a man of faith as well. So you hate the sin, but you love the sinner, right? And so so for me, you try to find the good in every situation and take that. And you never know what tool you're going to have to use in a toolbox to help an athlete go to the next level. And so I try not to have judgment. I try to seek for understanding and know that I'm 26 years in this business now. I know there's plenty of things that I can look back on and I'm like, man, I don't know if I would have done that again, and so I think hopefully we can all kind of start to have a little bit more patience and seek for understanding than just, releasing judgment.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you talk about it, both of us being men of faith, like we're not called here to judge. We're called here to love and to serve and to have grace for one another. And that's why, the story in the Bible of, he without sin cast the first stone. Like, that's something that I'm also guilty of, but have been continual on this path of growth and development to get rid of and to try to push the field to not do. And that's something that we posted the other day, that Zach Daycant had an incident where a baseball coach asked him to come in to talk to a recruit, and he kind of was like jaded about it. And the sport coach, rightfully so, was like, dude, what is it with all you strength coaches? And that is something where we need to at least acknowledge it, understand that we're not perfect, and then start to move the needle forward. Because, I mean, you said it yourself, you were a young strength coach at 23. Look at how far the field has come now, but look what's going to happen in the next 23 years, how much better this can be for everybody else. And that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do here, right? You need CEUs to remain certified. At Strength Coach Network, both of our long-form education courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, both have 2.0 CEUs to the NSCA in Category C. When you complete the learning and you complete the learning check, you will earn your 2.0 CEUs. That is 33% of the CEUs you need in a 3-year reporting period. Click the link down below to learn more about both courses.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's our obligation, right? We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We are making money in a profession where people literally thought it was bad to lift weights, 60 years ago. And, we got people making $1 million a year now doing a job that didn't exist, and so we have an obligation to move this profession further, but I think you got to meet the industry where it's at sometimes too, and so like, I think ultimately, it'd be easy for me to go out and say, hey, look, I'm worth $10,000 an hour to speak at a clinic or something, whatever. But if that's not what the market calls for, then, then I'm beating a drum that nobody's going to, nobody's going to follow, but if something, a clinic's normally $100 and you're like, okay, well, maybe it should be $200. Well, then that's maybe a gap that we can kind of close. Or same thing with the profession. I think if we don't want to be there on a Sunday for a 13-year-old that's driving through the town to meet with them for about recruiting, well, then, there's probably a way that we can go about kind of expressing that, in a professional manner, and lay some groundwork on the front end. I mean, that's to me that, like these interviews, so many times when we take these interviews and we just accept these jobs for what they are, and there's no kind of, front end level of expectation that's set, and so like, at this point in my career, like I sit in the interview and I'm like, look, I'm not going to be the guy that's jumping up and down and on the sideline. It's just not who I am. I'm not judging other people that do it, but it's just not who I am, and so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be the guy that's, coming in on a Sunday and giving up, a day of church for a 14-year-old that just happens to be driving through whatever town I'm in. I'm just not going to do that. And when you lay that groundwork on the front end, then you've set a level of expectation within the organization. Now, if they feel strongly about those things might have to happen, well, maybe there's maybe there's somebody on my staff that can do that. That's at that point in their career or something. But, at the end of the day, like I said, if it's going to help us win, I'm going to give it a really, really strong consideration, but at the same time, I think, us laying some expectations on the front end prevent a lot of these problems that we're all complaining about.
You were the guy that, as you said, at USF, you built and helped create a new program, and because the field is evolving, more and more people are being able to do this, whether it's at the Division II, Division III level. What is your piece of advice looking back? Obviously, you wrote the book, but in the time since and reflecting, what would be that piece of advice that you'd give to somebody that is getting in the dirt and they're starting a program from scratch or year 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think as you go through this profession, you have to take calculated risk. You have to take strategic risk. And I think, as you plot out, the picture that you have doesn't mean you have to have the exact roadmap of how you get to where you want to be as a strength coach. But the clearer that picture is, the more strategic you can be in making choices, what jobs you want, what mentors you seek out, what education or conferences or clinics or courses or whatever that you seek out to kind of, arm yourself with the knowledge that you need to reach that. I think too many times we just kind of sit back and we're like, okay, well, I've accomplished this stage. I became this head strength coach, assistant strength coach, GA, whatever it might be. And now you're just looking to the next thing without really having the kind of career, the education, the credentials, the knowledge to support the job that you want as you're chasing this thing. And so, like, if you're a young strength coach and you have a degree and you have a certification and you're working at D1 and you want to be that assistant strength coach for the Buffalo Bills, well, then you're not writing the resume that is going to support that job. You need to be making it, that you're working with a football program, that you're working with an elite football program, that you're managing multiple different athletes at different positions, that you understand how to interact with coaches, and different position coaches and those types of things. And so, like, I think my advice to young coaches is that, you have to, there's a difference between being credentialed and being qualified. And so you have to become qualified. I think you have to seek out mentors, and really continue to improve the room that you operate in. I think there's so many people that just kind of operate with the same 4 or 5 guys, and they just, you just get in this room and you just start complaining because you're all at the same stage. You just kind of complain about all the same things, and it's perpetual that way. And then I think you have to take risk. You have to take strategic risk. You got to move your family, across the country for a job that that maybe isn't the end point, but might be, a step in the right direction. You have to, when faced with multiple, I was faced with being the AAA guy for the Kansas City Royals or taking an unpaid internship with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and money, and there's no shortage of people saying that I should take that $60,000 job 20 something years ago. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I wanted to be football, and so I took that risk, and it paid off in the long run. And so I think taking those risks, seeking out knowledge from people that have, that are walk the walk that you're walking, is probably the best piece of advice I would give a young coach. And then I think you also got to define who you are. I think you got to know. I do this personality profile with our guys. It's a Gary Smiley personality profile, and you're either a lion, an otter, a beaver, a retriever, and they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. But it's something that they actually use in marriage counseling. And so if you're a lion, you like to pound your chest, you like to vision cast, you're gonna you like being up in front of the big group, but your attention to detail is really, really small. The beaver, very meticulous, has multiple to-do lists, but they don't like being up in front of people, right? The otter is the playful one. That's the one that's going to be dancing to the music that, you can't, they can create energy when there's none, but it's not the person you want handling your discipline. And then the retriever is just your loyal soldier. They're your typical athlete that leads by example, but they don't want the attention. They don't want to be in the media. They don't want to deal with all those things. And so everybody has strengths and weaknesses. You got to know what your strengths are, and then you got to hire for your weaknesses when you're a head strength coach, But when you're a young strength coach, when you're looking at these jobs, you need to be going in there saying, hey, look, what are you looking for? Are you looking for that otter? Are you looking for that playful person? Well, if you're not that fist pumping, jump up and down, create energy, dance with the music, then you're a beaver. You're probably going to set yourself up for failure. If you take that job, or you got to take the mindset of, look, I need to, just because I'm a lion, I like to pound my chest. I like to be up in front of people and vision cast. It doesn't mean that I can completely abandon details, and so I have to improve that. And so then you at least take that job knowing that I'm going to improve this skill set because it's going to pay dividends down the line. But just taking a job and just saying, hey, this is, it's at the University of whatever, and I want to wear that logo, that's not making a strategic move.
Speaking of strategic moves, you talk about it in the book. And again, I think you were on the forefront of it, but I had never heard of working in the Army or the H2F stuff that has now come out. But, the position that you had held for a brief time before you went to Tennessee, how strategically, my question that I'll frame is strategically, strength coaches with how tactical has evolved. What is your thought process on somebody that has worked in it and now has a different detached point of view being back in college athletics?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I took the military job for a couple of reasons. One is, I had gone through that coaching change and I was fed up with the profession. I did not handle that well. And so I took it really. I was going to get out. I was going to create my, I was going to, go all in on the podcast. I was going to do, kind of business on the side. I was going to have a real solid job that I believed in. But, I was off base by 2:00 every day. And so I had a lot of time, that's half a day as a strength coach. Right. And so I was going to put a lot of time into this business. And, in that time, I loved it. Awesome job, mission, all those types of things. But but the game of football raised me, as you probably read in that book. Right. And so I just missed the game more than I missed even strength conditioning. So that's why I took it. But, it was also a strategic move because I knew that if I took that job, then I could leverage all the things that you think of when you think of Army Special Forces, leadership and discipline and mental toughness and all these types of qualities. I knew I could leverage that back in the football space, and so, so I think that was part of the mindset, the psychology of why I took that job. But the other part of that equation, I think, is, strength coaches, again, this is where I think we've really dropped the ball as a profession, is we have not continued to advance it, in many, many different ways. The only real, truly example that I can point to is tactical strength and conditioning, where we thought outside the box, outside of the sport box, and said, this is where we could potentially go. But we need to have a space for aging strength coaches, whether that be these high performance managers that are being created or high performance directors, or that we're creating legitimate academic programs where our all that expertise can go in and be professors and give, and teach and have a place to land as you age. Or, I not too long ago, I talked to an executive with an oil company about putting strength coaches on oil rigs because, of the injuries and everything that happens there, and thinking outside the box and looking at in the business sector. And so, we have to continue to advance this profession. We have to continue to define it and teach people how to hold it accountable if we want that security that people are drastically looking for, and quite honestly, I've taken the opposite approach. I want to be treated like a football coach, now, but show me another football coach that deals with 120 guys every single day of every week, and so you need to pay me like a coordinator. You need to, and, I understand that my job is as much of an art as it is a science, and that, basically it's either in vogue or it's not, either you're going to support it and, you're going to pay me like a coordinator and we're all going to win, or we're not. And I understand the volatility of that leads to, no wins equals, no job potentially. And so, so I think you either got to take each approach, but, aligning in the medical model or aligning in some of these other, kind of ways, I don't think is the answer, to be honest with you.
Really? I mean, I'm interested to hear you say more on that because I want to know how to push this field forward. I want to be on the forefront of doing better things because, shoot, growing up as a young kid in Massachusetts, so in the Northeast, like I think it's different now, but I didn't know, like college sports, unless it's college hockey, nobody cares in the Northeast. I didn't know that strength and conditioning was a profession, much like you. So I want to push this field forward and I want to continue to do the things. So, like, hearing you say that medical model, for people in the football world and maybe basketball, I think that would make sense. But I'd love to hear your thoughts more on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of strength coaches, they want to align in the medical model, and they believe that that's going to bring about stability. And I do think that there's a pathway for that. I think the Olympic sports, the non-revenue sports, where it's not the pressures of winning and losing, and the time commitment and all those types of things maybe isn't as great. I think there should be a head strength coach that is in charge of the Olympic sports that are the non-revenue sports, that doesn't change with the wind of coaches being hired and fired for football or basketball or baseball or some of these other revenue driven sports. But these revenue driven sports, I think that they should be a member of their coaching staff, and they're hired just like one of the coaches. I think when you align with the medical model, I don't care how much education you have. You have your PhD. I'm finishing my PhD. I don't care how much education you have. When you're sitting in a room with the chief medical officer and the physical therapist that went to school forever, and the general physician and the orthopedic and all that, on paper, you're the least qualified guy in the room. You're the least credentialed guy, in the room. And, none of those guys can walk into the head football coach's office and affect change, or none of those guys or ladies could walk in and command the room of 120 athletes at the same time, and it's a different job, and for us to be at the bottom of that hierarchy, I don't think is the right thing. I mean, and honestly, I want to be paid like a coordinator. I don't want to be paid like a trainer or whatever. And so I think, us staying in the coaching model, and the other part of that equation is honestly, like, there's pride that I associate with being called coach. Like, I mean, that's special to me. It's taking a person on a journey that they can't take themselves. And so, so I think that I think there's a blend there. I think there's just, I think the sports that are non-revenue should not be disrupted when football loses. They should keep the consistency there.
Looking to expand your education further, but you don't want to pay the massive fees of going back to school? At Strength Coach Network, we have 2 long-form education courses that both cost less than one course taught to you by an online school. If you click down below to learn more about Fundamentals 1 or Fundamentals 2, you will be able to sign up for our education course that has over 20 hours of educational content brought to you by some of the biggest names in the field. Dr. Brian Mann, Zach Daycant, Jeff Moyer, Terrence Kennel, and many more inside of this course, all for less than the price of one course at a college university.
And I think coaches that are done with the rat race of chasing around different logos and different jobs, when you get to that point, then, working in that environment, I think it's probably makes a lot of sense, right? I want to maybe have the option to stay, and, and I'm good with working and that, at that level of money and security and not flying private planes or whatever it is, right? But if you're gonna chase the logos, you're gonna chase the money and all that kind of stuff, well, then you have to be okay with the volatility that comes along with that.
Yeah, you have to know, like, hey, if you're an options trader in stocks or like whatever you're doing, you need to know clear delineation. And I guess any of our listeners out there might be thinking, like, okay, the medical model was designed, at least what was spun and told to me was to prevent negligence from sport coaches. And it almost seemed like the medical world was pitting against sport coaches. And that's just me talking hypothetically, but it seems like from a younger strength coach, right? I'm 36. That's why it was introduced to me. from your perspective, and I'm going to phrase it this way because when I had Bob Alejo on the show, he's very famous for being like, hey, tell me what you guys call it now. I'll tell you what we called it back in the day. Where
Right.
did you see the medical model and this high performance model get brought in? Because I guess you've been doing this almost, 10 years longer than I've been alive, like, or 10 years less than I've been alive. Like, so you have a different experience than I do. Where did you see this get introduced and how was it phrased to you?
Yeah, I think the NCAA had a safeguards committee, and when there was some deaths occurring in the off season and things along those lines, there was a big push by the NCAA to align the strength and conditioning coaches with the safeguards committee, which essentially is very medically driven. And that's the thing. Like I am completely supportive. We have an obligation. We should have very much the very same you know, do no harm and all those types of things that come along with being, a medical doctor, in our field. And I think, again, we have to do a better job of defining solid principles and protocols that, are best practices in the space, so that way, you can't go too far off the rails and those types of things. And there is oversight, but again, being reporting to just the chief medical officer of the university, they don't understand your job any better or worse than the athletic director does. And oftentimes like they're in awe of what you do on a daily basis as well, and what you're able to do, just like you're in awe of what they do, and so like, I think, it's different professions, it's different, and to be evaluated that way, by a chief medical officer that's just reading research without, that we know is behind the curve anyways. And without the context of being in that space every single day, I don't think that's right either, And so again, I don't think it's a reductionist line of thinking. I don't think it's either or. I think it's an and. I think there's got to be a blend there that occurs. But the reality is that you all of a sudden reporting to the athletic trainer or the chief medical officer or whatever, just because you want stability. I think it's a double-edged sword that way.
Changing gears a little bit on that in terms of education now, a colleague of mine was kind of filling me in on everything that you had done with play and the play education. Can you kind of talk about that and what you had envisioned and started and just all of that? Because again, he was speaking very highly of everything that you had done and helped educate me more on everything that you had done. So I just kind of want to learn more about that from your perspective, not from mine and his perspective.
Yeah, so I was at Eastern Michigan at the time, and I left the Cincinnati Bengals to go to Eastern Michigan. My college football coach got the head job. I told my wife that if he ever got a Division I job, I'd leave where I was at and go there. They hadn't had a winning season in over 20 years, and so it was an interesting deal. And like I mentioned, we adopted our kids. Our kids had kind of a range of learning disabilities because of that. And so, long story short, we just couldn't find a school up in Michigan that could support our kids, and so moving my family up there became just not an option. And so I ended up living apart from my family for 2.5 years between Cincinnati and Eastern Michigan. And it's not as bad as it sounds. Like, I went down, they came up, we talked every night, Skyped every night, but you're not kissing your kids every single night, and so that was hard on me. And I wasn't the coach that I wanted to be. I wasn't the man that I wanted to be. And so I made a choice to kind of leave that job, and very fortunate that Brett Waits and Rich Gray, they kind of created a position. As a vice president of performance and education, but it was really kind of an ambassador for the company and leveraging, my network, leveraging, all these things that are common practice in business that aren't common practice in strength and conditioning. They really had some foresight and vision, and ended up creating this position. And what I did not know, what I did not account for, was that when I kind of became essentially a free agent, on top of the education and on top of the natural kind of, connections and things that I was able to do for the company, a bunch of coaching contracts kind of came our way, kind of out of the blue. And so I ended up creating, a coaching contract with the Chinese Olympic Committee, where we placed 28 of the, 28 coaches over, working with their teams. I worked with a professional lacrosse team. I worked with football teams in Mexico, Poland, rugby teams in Australia, AFL teams in Australia. And so I literally was just kind of globe-trotting the world, working with different teams and going in and helping set up their programs, doing remote coaching at times, going in and being, an expert. And again, I mean, it's kind of the CEO strength coach come to life, right? Is all these skill sets that we develop as coaches, when put in a business environment, really flourished, and I was very fortunate, awesome company, great people. But like I said earlier, the game raised me, and so when my kids got old enough and graduated high school, I didn't want to, that was the biggest thing, is I didn't want to miss I missed the first 5 years of their life. I didn't want to miss the last 3 years that they were in the house. But once they graduated high school, and then one of my good friends got the job at Fresno State as head football coach. It just all aligned to where I would go back in and go back into the football environment, like, that I feel like is in my DNA, in a lot of ways, but do miss the entrepreneurial side of it, things, and miss the company in a lot of ways for sure. But I think, one of the things that you're doing right now that I believe in wholeheartedly is most coaches are, like side hustles and, kind of creating these other revenue streams and things like that. For a lot of coaches, they look at it and view it as only they're getting this going so that they can leave what they're currently doing, and that's how the entrepreneurial world looks at, like, side hustles and things. I think coaches, they're not doing that. They're not doing that because they don't love what they do. They're doing it because they just, the risk associated with losing your job or trying to create stability in an unstable environment. You're just trying to be able to manage the periods of transition. All of a sudden you go from a job, you don't have an income. A lot of coaches, because they get to that point, they miss a job cycle. All of a sudden they have to go roof houses or sell insurance or whatever. And they end up getting out of the profession because, they just can't afford to do it, like sit out for a year. And what I try to do with, these entrepreneurial journeys and my time with play really helped teach me is I'm preparing for the periods of transition. I'm preparing and creating stability in an unstable world. And to me, that's, if you can do that and you can create stability in this profession, we all know that it's one of the greatest things in the world to do.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, this is the greatest profession. Again, yeah, like I think what we get to do, working with athletes on a day-to-day basis, especially when you get immersed with them in a team setting like the Power Five or in football, if it's the NFL, but being able to be with them and see the growth and to be able to combine your personal life with their life, where your family, and they know you're like, my kids used to come and, fist bump the players on Fridays, because, obviously Fridays before a Saturday game, not as busy of a practice. So, the old head coach was fine with family being around. And when you can mold that and you can see that, and family is something that you've already talked about here and you've talked about in the book. I want our listeners to hear you talk about that in case they haven't heard the book, because it's something that, when interwoven, I don't think that's a word, but when put into your life the way that you talk about it in the book, I think it can make for a fantastic marriage of family, coach, and just all of it.
Yeah, I think, I made a mistake early in my career where I did not bring my kids around enough because I felt like they would be in the way, or they would be, or it was, be a potential that they would get hurt, or I was concerned about what the coach would think or whatever. And I should have brought them around more, and did later, as they aged, I did more of that for sure. But to me, like getting your kids around a diverse group of, of highly motivated individuals on a daily basis, you couldn't do anything better for your kids, and getting around, being able to interact and learn how to watch, work in action, and, create kind of relationships with a variety of people, I think is so important in things. And so I would only, I would encourage, I think what strength coaches struggle with is this kind of work-life balance, this, and I think, what I tell people is to be great at anything, to be elite in anything, you have to be skewed. It's not, there's no way, shape around it. Like there's going to be times in your career and seasons of life where you're going to be 90% career and 10% family, or whatever, right? The key is to be 100% present when you are with your family, and I think, that's what people fail is they get home and they're so tired that they go and they lay down or they watch TV, or they're there, but they're not really there. And when, you got to stay at work until the work is done. But once you go home, that needs to be your time with your family, and you have to be just as intentional about that time as you are about your job, And so my wife would always call me kind of Disneyland dad, because every time I came home, like I tried to make it fun and memorable, and and all, and that was always fun when dad came home, and it was always kind of, it was always kind of disciplined when she was around. But I mean, the point being is that, like, even though I was dog tired, we would go hike a mountain, we would go, camping, we would go, to the park and throw the ball, or, whatever. And as your obligation then is, how do I win back some of that time, as a strength coach, and so that's where technology really made a lot of sense to me. I think I gave the example in the book of a lot of tools, like Trello and the Getting Things Done system, or outsourcing, or a lot of things, learning Excel and equations, or whatever it might be. Like, you have an obligation to kind of research tools that are going to help make you more efficient, so that you can buy back more of that time. And so taking courses, or taking, basically every night I fall asleep to a YouTube video of something productivity based to try to win back some of that time. And and eventually you get to a point where you're maybe 60-40 work, or 55, 45, whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, to be great, you have to put in the time, you have to put in the work. And the more that you can include your family on that time, the greater the win.
So speaking about, time and being great, you got to spend time and be with some of the greatest people, and you just talked about it, where you wanted to be able to leverage leadership, teamwork, and discipline from the military. You also work in football, and we've seen it where military toughness can get bastardized, and we've talked about this on the show with Rusty Witt before. Where does it go wrong? Because I think it comes from a good place, and how can we make it better for athletes and coaches, so that way, A, coaches are not negative about it, but B, we can actually take principles from some of the greatest people in the world with the military and apply it in football and other sports.
Yeah, I think what most coaches do is they confuse passion with emotion.
Ooh.
They're trying to display passion. They're trying to, a kid's late, they're trying to say, show them that, hey, look, you coming late is not going to help us win. It's letting your teammates down. I've been here for 15 hours. I can be here on time.
Want to level up your education for free? go ahead and click the link down below, whether you're an aspiring, established, or head strength and conditioning coach, and we're going to send you a free email course that will help you take your career to the next level, regardless of where you're currently at in your career. Again, click the link down below for this free education course.
You can get here on time. It's all these types of things, right? You're trying to show passion for doing the right thing and to change a behavior, but you're having an emotional response, and when you have an emotional outburst, sometimes you can break down a relationship in one emotional outburst, right? And so, what you have to do is you have to be very clear on the front end. You have to define like accountability and those types of things very clearly on the front end, and then you have to be 100% consistent with it, And then when those things come up, you just have to be very matter of fact. So like in the military, like you're in a heated battle, like all this, or you're in a drill situation. Those guys aren't screaming at one another. They're two alphas. Like that's just not going to work, right? What they're all about and what they teach a lot of times in Q school and a lot of these different things is how do you lower your heart rate in those situations? How do you you drop things and de-escalate things to where things are mission critical, or and you eliminate a lot of the BS that kind of goes along with it. And so I think the first thing that coaches need to do to create more mental toughness in their team, more resiliency in their team, is to take the emotion out of it. Use that as a tool, just like anything. I mean, there's definitely times where I'm going to take it to another level, right? But that's but that's going to be when it's absolutely needed, right? But if you're just consistent and you're not emotional about it and you're matter of fact about it, then that becomes the standard. It just becomes what you do, and you take out their only weapon. When you're an 18 to 22-year-old man, like their only weapon is to go to freaking level 10. They don't have the vocabulary or the knowledge sometimes to be able to match you on that scale, and so like when you eliminate that, you take away their only weapon. Usually they're like, oh yeah, you're right, coach, and 9 times out of 10 they're giving you a hug after you get done, doing whatever accountability you got with them, and they grow. And that's, again, I mean, there's no growth in comfort, right? You got to make them uncomfortable. You have to put them in challenging situations, but when you become the good angel on their shoulder instead of the bad angel on their shoulder, like, you're able to get far more accomplished.
How have you been able to bond with, I mean, you with people down in USF, Tennessee, professional athletes in Cincinnati, then Eastern Michigan, Fresno, Washington, like you've been all over, you were in Europe, so you've been all over. What are some of the commonalities in terms of being able to buy in with the people that you're working with? Like, what's your biggest point of view on how to do
that? You got to be authentic. I think it's number one. I think you got to say what you mean and mean what you say, right? You have to live your life in a way that is respectable by your athletes. You have to take the time. I mean, there's actually a quote that team chaplain had, but I get attributed to a lot, is that you spell love, Time, right? What you love, you'll spend time on. And, and so you got to spend time on these athletes outside of the weight room, and my mindset on it was always, you got them for 2 hours a day. They got 22 hours to mess up everything you just did. Like you're fighting a losing battle if you're not involved in those 22 hours some type of way, and so that's why, like constantly texting athletes or, driving down the street and getting to a stoplight and being like, hey, Bob, I freaking just drove by Taco Bell. I better not have saw your butt in Taco Bell. Like, like little things like that, will just give them a little nugget, or sending them, a daily devotional or whatever it might be. Like whenever you do that, you take the time outside of the weight room, then it's easier to buy, for them to buy into you in those 2 hours. Right. And, I give the example in the book that I asked 3 questions to our athletes. I asked them, if you didn't play football, what would you do? and very few of them have thought about their mortality in the sport, and so when you really present that to them, you start to kind of get to like what some of their inner motivations are, right? And it's not necessarily what job you're going to do, but like, what do you want to do in life? What do you want to accomplish? And then the second question I ask them, what's the most difficult thing you ever been through? And you really want to get to the core of somebody. I call this the why meeting. I don't know if you ever read Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. But, I thought the book was great, right? You got the golden circle, you got the how, the what, the why. But nobody really tells you how to get to the why, and to do it at the speed that we have to do it at as coaches. And so I would ask you 3 questions in what I'd call my why meeting is, what's the most difficult thing you ever been through? I've learned all kinds of crazy things, and you really learn how to kind of, I had an athlete that watched his dad shoot his mom and then commit suicide in front of him. Like, I'm not going to motivate that guy with fear, like it's not going to happen. Right. So like, you learn how to kind of really work with these guys, but you also learn kind of what their makeup is. And then I would always ask them, who's the most influential person in their life? And I wanted to know who that person was, but ultimately I wanted permission to be able to call that person. And so I would take time and I call that person and I tell them something good, because they get a call from coach. They're expecting something bad. I make sure it's something good right away. Right. And then I tell them that they thought that they're saying that they're the most influential person in their life because, as 22-year-olds, we're really good about telling people how much we mean to them. And so that usually becomes a pretty powerful moment. But then like we hang up the phone and the first thing they do is they always call that athlete and they start talking about how much I care about them or how much I'm invested in them or how cool of a conversation that was. And, if I have the most influential person in their life signing off on me as a coach, like I win, I win. So like, and we can break down walls pretty quick. And as long as you become that genuine and authentic person and you're consistent and you're not emotional, then usually you can break down almost any barrier.
How do you handle then and recommend to everybody else, like holding that line in the discipline? And I guess as I'm saying this, I'm going to answer my own question, but is it just because you did all that work on the front end so that way when you do need to hold them accountable and you do things and it's clear, consistent, and communicated, that they know that you're coming from a place of love and that it's not just, oh, Coach Ron, he doesn't care about me?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to be emotional, right? And so like, as long as you're consistent about it, you clearly defined it. The standard is the group standard, right? And so you have a little bit of pack mentality at that point, right? So if I'm having an issue, then I just simply be like, hey, look, like X, Y, and Z player, like this is why we do things, right? This is how, this is our program, right? And, all of a sudden that usually helps kind of get them over the hump if there is one. But I mean, there's been plenty of times, more times than not, that I've turned around and I've done the accountability with them and just to kind of be in their ear for the hour or 45 minutes or whatever it might be to do it, and so that it's showing it's not punishment. It's a reminder, to make the right choice, and, we always talk about 1-0, right? They went 0-1 that decision-making process, but there's 35,000 other decisions they're going to make today that can be good,
That's a really good thought process. I'm going to switch topics on this one. You talked about it earlier, but having the jadedness of being at USF and how you essentially wanted to get out of the field, and then you also what I would consider humbling yourself and being an assistant at the Cincinnati Bengals in the NFL. I'd like our members and our listeners to be able to kind of understand, like, how did you do that? How were you able to move on from the jadedness? How were you able to swallow your own pride so then that way coaches, myself included, can learn from it and replicate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, ego's the enemy, right? Pride is, was brought down freaking, empires, right? And I think, it's never easy. I think, going to Cincinnati, every time it's been like maybe a prideful moment, right? Or maybe it's something where I've, like it did make sense to me, right? Being a man of faith, like there's God's plan, and like you have some hope there in that regard. But then, almost every time in my life that's happened, I've learned something that's made me better in the long run, and being in Cincinnati taught me lots of lessons, and that I was able to take, back to being a head guy and be like, okay, maybe I need to go about explaining something differently to my assistants in a different way because I didn't appreciate it that way. Or, maybe I need to clearly define this in my program that maybe I didn't have quite buttoned up yet, and so I think being, in those environments, you always look again for the win. Where do what's the, what lesson am I taking away from this? How can I apply it to my things? And then I think the other part of it is that having like some external things going, whether it's real estate or, investing or entrepreneurial ventures or whatever, like I was able to put more time into some of those things, maybe that and so I looked at it as opportunity in that regard too, and so the last thing I would say on that is that if you're in this field for any period of time, like the Titans, the Giants, I mean, the people that freaking are the elite of the elite in our profession, like you see them rise, but you always see them come back down the other way too, and so like the same people you see going up, you're the same people you're going to be seeing going down. So you better treat people the right way, both on your ascent and in your descent, but also like you recognize that like, hey, look, like this profession gets us all, and so like, you got to find your meaning in this in other ways other than just wins and losses and what logo you have on your chest.
With that being said, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to, when people talk about Coach Mac, what do you want that to be?
Yeah, I think, I want my athletes to know that I was always in their corner. Like no matter what, they if they needed anything, I was their coach beyond just the years that I worked with them in the weight room. That I brought value to their life in more ways than just strength and conditioning. I want other coaches. I feel obligated to give back to this profession because it's given me so much in so many ways. I mean, it literally took a kid that was single parent, 5 kids, inner city, Kansas City, and literally took me around the world and allowed me to provide for my family in a way that I could only ever have imagined, when I was a kid. And, I want, ultimately, I want to leave this field better than I found it, and whether that's creating more opportunities or creating, jump starting coaches' careers. I mean, I think the last time I counted, there's 32 Division I head strength coaches that were former staff members at some point. I take a lot of pride in giving opportunity to athletes and coaches alike to have them have the same opportunities and chances that I've had in this career.
What's something about you that people don't know about you that you wish people would know about you?
Good question. I think there's a big difference between Coach Mac and Ron McKeefery. Coach Mac is somebody that can speak in front of hundreds of people, that is, that likes to, put out books and podcasts and be, in the public eye and
from earlier.
Yeah, be the lion and all that. But at the same time, like ultimately, I'm Ron McKeefery just wants to be hanging out with his family on a freaking 10-acre horse farm right here and in the rain, just hanging out. And, and I'm perfectly content and happy with that, and so, and then most importantly that I served my God and found a way to, to bring value to people's lives.
How do you negotiate that? You know, the faith piece. You and I have talked about that off air, but that's something that I've struggled with to find a way to be able to handle it. What's your piece of advice on that for coaches, myself included?
I think, I mean, spirituality to me, um, in a lot of ways, it's just, it's character development, right? I think it's living your life in a way that people can be proud of, and bringing value to other people's lives. And, I think the people that really get it, in my opinion, are the ones that understand that, God has given that kind of burning desire in them. But that said, I think, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about you don't throw a light into the light, throw a light into the darkness. And for me, my witness is being in an environment where, not everything is godly, right? Not everything is there. And like I said earlier, like, it doesn't mean that I don't love the sinner. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't be there trying to give it another example or a different way, or to bring value to their life some type of way, and that's that relationship that's between them and God. My job is just to be a vessel to try to help strengthen that relationship between them and God. And I know that that's going to be reconciled in some type of way at some point, right? But in the meantime, all I can do is try to bring value to their life and try to to point to where my strength comes from. And ultimately, I think when you do that and you just show, you start from just a character development and way to live your life and way to be maybe a better athlete, all those things lead back to godly principles that you can point to if given that opportunity. And so that's, that's why I went on, finishing up my PhD in Christian counseling, and allows me to be a little bit more open about it in a public setting, I guess. But like at the same time, it's I don't think it's going to necessarily change how I go about living my life as a Christian coach.
Last question for you, so that way you can continue and we can respect your time. But with the ever evolvingness of college football and college sports, from again somebody that you've been in this field for quite a long time, how do you see strength and conditioning evolving in the next 1, 3, 5, 10, 15? Project strength and conditioning in the future. How does it progress, or where do you see it going? And then what can we do to make sure that it progresses in the right direction based off what you want it to see?
I think where I hope that it goes is exactly what I said. I think that there needs to be a really strong academic program, not an emphasis, not a concentration, not a kinesiology with a strength and conditioning minor emphasis or whatever. But I think that there needs to be a legitimate degree in strength and conditioning that incorporates not just the science and the principles, but also the group dynamics and all these different things that go into being a successful coach. I think if we do that, we solve a lot of problems, right? We solve the problem of advancing research and really truly defining best practices, because if we're got an academic program, then that's what we're constantly putting out research in that regard. I think it also strengthens our base and gets us, a stronger coming out of college and more prepared coming out of college. I think it gives us an area for our aging strength coaches to go and, and continue to finish this thing without age being, a factor, in this. I'm getting to that age where, people are, they're using terms like you're overqualified and you're too knowledgeable or whatever, and it's like, that's, it's crazy to me. Joe Ken and I were talking about this the other day. He's like, you're telling me that you don't want the most qualified, you don't want the most, in some of these roles. And so like, we have to you have to be able to retire being a strength coach in some type of way for this to be a legitimate profession. Where I think the profession is headed, I think it's going to go more concierge oriented. I think athletes are going to have the power. I think athletes are going to hire their individual performance teams. and you're going to be hired as an individual strength coach, and you might have 5-10 athletes that you work with, maybe remotely or, some type of virtual or augmented reality type deal. I think things are going to get very disciplined or, very niche, and so like, I think you're going to have kind of like in MMA where you have your speed coach, your power coach, your nutrition coach, your whatever. And I think that's, where things are going. I would caution us on, again, and going back to the book and, there's 3 stages to be a success, or there's 3, things that you have to do to be a success to me. That's being a technician, manager, and entrepreneur, right? Too many coaches stay focused just in the technical stage where they're only focused on sets and reps and, protocols and progressions and regressions and things along those lines. And the reality is that, artificial intelligence is going to wipe that out pretty quick. Like if that's what you're hinging on right now, like you're not going to, like Chat GPT is going to kick your butt here in about, a year. And so it has to be that, that leadership and group dynamics and getting people to do things that they don't want to do. And so learning more and more of those quote unquote soft skills, and figuring out how to operate that in a more of a remote setting. I think if I was a young strength coach, that's where I'd be putting a lot of my attention right now.
Coach, I could talk with you all day. I want to respect your time. So thank you very much for sharing with us. And thanks for everything that you've done to push the field forward. If anybody has not read the book, read the book. It has been an awesome read of mine. I wish I had been able to reach out to you sooner, but I had not. And I'm glad that I have now. A buddy of mine, one of my former assistants, Joe Alexander, he's real good friends with Matt Nine. And Matt Nine, they were telling me a story. One of Matt's interns, somebody that Matt Nine knows, interned for you and just said nothing but the best things about you. So thank you very much for everything you've done for the field. You've paved the way for people like me to do what I'm doing now. And I feel like we'll be in touch, off air. So thank you very much, Coach.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for what you're doing as well. And like I said, it's to put yourself out there like you have, and to put a resource out there. People don't understand the amount of work that goes into that. And just commend you for that, and just would encourage as many others to make your mark. Again, we're in this first 100 years. So like, how can you, whether it's podcasting, putting out videos, putting out written word, whatever, like we all have an obligation to document this a little bit better than we're doing. And obviously you're doing a big part of that with the mission that you're on. And so appreciate you, man. Thanks so much.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.